Welcome to the Book of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. Debbie Levy retells her own mother's wartime experiences in The Year of Goodbyes, a true story of friendship, family, and farewells. Her writing was sparked when she discovered her mom's poesy album, a sort of poetic autograph book popular among children in the 1940s. I met with Debbie and her mom at Book Expo America in 2010, where they told me about the book and about a new online poesy album project that lets readers contribute their own writings. Be sure to check it out at theyearofgoodbyes.blogspot.com and check out Debbie's book trailer video at bookoflifepodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Debbie Levy, and my book that just came out in March of 2010 is The Year of Goodbyes, a true story of friendship, family, and farewells. It's the story of my mother, Jutta Levy's last year living as a girl in 1938 when she was 12 years old. And the book is woven around entries from my mother's poesie album. Poesy, like poetry album. Think of an autograph album, and the pages that her friends and family wrote are, first of all, very beautiful, and they're reproduced as facsimiles at the beginning of each of the chapters, and they are stepping stones to the story of what happened in that year. So each chapter opens with one of these obviously translated poesies, and then what the narrative of my mother's and her friends' experience from January to November of that year unroll in the story. There was much anxiety about how are we going to get out of Germany before anything worse happens? How will my father get permission from the Germans and, even more difficult, permission from the Americans to come to this country? Where are my friends going when sometimes they disappear? And of course there was the saying goodbyes over and over again, which was very, very poignant. But there's also a lot of sort of fun and normalcy in the book, because when you're 11 and 12 years old, even if your world's falling apart around you, you're going to be thinking and talking about normal things, right? You're going to be gossiping and wanting to play and doing all of those sorts of things.
So, is it in the voice of your mom?
It's in the first person, so it's in the voice of my mother. I go into her head. So this is a true story, but it is told in free verse in the first person. The free verse, which is, of course, so easy to read if you're a tween and up. It's a very airy form. Sort of mimics and also honors, I think, these little poesies that are excerpted from the poesy album. And for me, also, the free verse lets the story be told in this very kind of emotional, girlish way. Like I tell kids when I go into schools, we all know that nobody goes around talking and thinking in free verse, but nor do we go around talking and thinking in complete sentences.
Right.
And I think in many ways free verse actually very much mimics, maybe not the way that we talk, but the way that we think. Mm-hmm. So that's why it seems so natural to write it like that.
So your mom is sitting right here with us.
She
so
is.
Was that hard to write in the voice of another person who, it's not an imagined person, it's not a historical figure, it's a real person who you know, who's there with you? Is that daunting to write in their voice?
I have to say it was not daunting. My mother and I have had, for my whole life, a really wonderful relationship. So there was a lot of oral history type research, plus all kinds of documentary research. So I really was able to sort of immerse myself in Mom. Plus, I had her around to tell me when I said things wrong. My mother did not hesitate to tell me and to say, no, this is how I felt.
I was going to ask, did you vet the book and make sure that she was saying what you would say?
Yes. Also, Debbie did not mention, aside from the poesy album, I started a diary a couple months before we left. So there is a record in German, of course, of many facts that I wrote down as a 12-year-old. So that did not need to be researched. It was right there.
How does it feel to have your life story told through your daughter's book? That must be really special.
It is. And you don't want to get me started on that. You really don't. It's truly an honor. I'm just sorry my late husband wasn't around to share this. He would be so proud.
Back to you, Debbie. What inspired you to take your mother's memories and turn it into a book?
Well, I'd wanted to write my mother's story for many years because there is a dramatic story there. This is 1938 we're talking about, before the worst of the Holocaust. In writing about that year, my mother's experience, but also like the experience of her friends and family, I really wanted to get across that these people, my mother's family in Germany, and most of her family was actually in Poland, and they visited there at least once a year. They had really nice lives. These were not shtetl Jews. Not that there's anything wrong with shtetl Jews, but there is sometimes a certain preconception about, the Jews in Europe, and why didn't they just leave? Why didn't they just pick up and leave and come to America, where they would be safe? A, as if anybody knew the Holocaust was coming.
Right.
B, as if it's so easy to get into America.
Right.
And C, as if they had lives that were inconsequential and they should just, drop them and leave. And it is true that by 1938, life was not as lovely as it once was, but it was a very nice European life. In 1998, I wrote a little article for the Washington Post to commemorate Kristallnacht, and I wrote a little piece of her story. I wrote about their dramatic departure from Germany on the eve of Kristallnacht. Well, among the readers of that article were a couple of 70-somethings who read it, said, "Is that our Jutta?" Because how many Juttas are there? It was. They were classmates with my mother back in Hamburg, Germany. And so then, many, many phone calls. And 2 years later, they had a reunion in 2000 in the D.C. area, in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I grew up and my mother lived at the time. And Mom brought her poesy album to that. And that's when I sort of fell on the poesy album, learned about the tradition. Some of the other girls had them too. I got hers translated, and I was just really taken by the fact that almost every entry that her friends and relatives wrote related in a striking way to what was going on in their lives. I'm not saying they wrote them intentionally to reflect what was going on in their lives, but there it is, like for a writer like me to see. It was a gift. With the Year of Goodbyes, there's this, if I may, there's one thing that I'm excited to talk about, and that is that when I present the Year of Goodbyes, I do a slideshow about the books. It has many images from the poesy album. Sometimes the girls drew in color, and people added stickers, and my mother's cousin Guy, a boy who lived in Paris, drew a beautiful pen and ink drawing. So there's that, but then I also have started talking to kids about the relationship between poesy albums and today's social media. Poesy albums as the great-grandmother. My mother would prefer that I just say grandmother of Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, etc. And, we don't have time for me to tell you, for us to go through differences and similarities.
I want to hear that. That's very interesting. Go on.
Well, they're short. They are personal, and they are a means of exchanging information with, usually with your friends, right? Of course, the differences are huge, or you may not know, actually, Heidi, since I don't think you've seen the poesy album yet.
Right.
But poesy album entries were quite formal, and of course, Twitter's not, and Facebook's normally not. Poesy album entries are also planned and not impromptu, like the kids and even adults who wrote on my mother's book, they might take it home and give it back to you the next day. And I think one of the biggest differences is that with social media, we are more exchanging information. Meet you there, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, let's go to this movie or that movie. And the Poesie album was much more a means of expression. Now, there are exceptions, right? Like just yesterday in the paper, on the front page of USA Today, there was an article on Twitter, and they published one of the Dalai Lama's tweets, which, of course, was really different from LOL, So the Dalai Lama's tweets were actually very Poesie album-like. So it's really easy for middle school kids to get this, and then to talk about why might you want to be writing little things? I'm not talking about keeping a huge journal. You don't have to go write a whole personal history or oral history of somebody else. But why might you want, in some venue, to be writing things that are both personal but also relating to what's going on in our world? That is, that aren't just trivial and pushed off the page of Facebook in the next hour. Of course, they really get it, and what we do is I give them prompts to write, and it's like never more than 6 lines. Give me 6 lines. If you can give me 3, it's even better. We start very personal, like what would you... So a prompt would be, if you had to leave your home forever, and you could take 1 suitcase, and of course this relates to people who had to leave Europe, like my mother, what would you take? I mean, in this one school that I was at a couple of weeks ago, it was so gratifying because the teachers and the principal and the other librarians, they were so blown away by the things that these students wrote just because they were asked. They said, well, who knew that these students had these poetic thoughts or even profound thoughts in them? Well, you just have to kind of ask.
So what would they take? What did they say?
It was really all about photographs and personal items like that. You might think, they're going to be right. They're going to say, well, I've got to have my iPhone or my iPod. Nuh-uh. No, it was really so much more grounded, for want of a better word, than you might anticipate. Although, really, why should we be surprised? At bottom, most of us treasure friendship over junk, over stuff. And then we move into prompts and mini poesies that look more outward, like write about something in the world that you would change. Kids in your school who you have seen express hatred or bigotry toward people that they think are just not cool enough, write something about that. And these students wrote fabulous things. I've created this online poesy album project. And they can send me emails, but I'm encouraging them to actually do the pages so I can scan them in, because there is something about handwriting. That's also what we talk about, something about handwriting that really humanizes. Humanizes history, right, from 70 years ago, and reflects yourself today. So that's a very long-winded way of trying to tell you about something I'm excited about that I'm doing with my book.
I can see what you're excited about it. That's really interesting. What's the website?
theyearofgoodbyes.com.
But is that where you're doing the poesy project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a combination of the book and the poesy project?
Yeah, there's an explanation. There's stuff about the book there, but I really set it up for the poesy album project.
Neat. I love how interactive that is.
I love it too, I have to admit. It's a way of bringing the story, it's a way of bringing history, but it's also a way to get readers to think about, okay, what am I creating for myself so that 70 years later, what am I going to remember about myself? Yeah, what will I didn't have that. That's a good one. What will I bring to the reunion? Exactly. One of the questions I have that they write about is what do you think your friends will remember about you in 70 years, and what do you hope they'll forget? But what will I bring to the reunion is another perfect thing that you'll forgive me if I may add it to my...
Go ahead. Yeah.
If you end up seeing it on the poesy album, theyearofgoodbyes.com, yes, you'll know it was you. Anyway.
Great. Well, thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Heidi.
Have fun. If you want to add something, sure.
For many years, I've done talking to groups, adult, college, high school, middle school kids, about 20-some years, because they need to know. I still do it because survivors, like that's what we're called, not refugees, we're a dying breed. And if you hear a story like the Year of Goodbyes, or and meet a person like myself who was actually there, it makes it more viable to meet a person. I also did a videotape for Steven Spielberg, as many, many other survivors did, all over the world. And that is another learning tool that is in every venue that houses Holocaust material. So that's very important. I thought I'd add it in. But thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.
There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. You can also listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And, of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida, at cbiboca.org, and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.